to Stocks Down Under. Today we're joined by Coby Hanoch and Dadi Perlmutter from Weebit Nano. Guys, good to have you back in Australia.
Thank you for having us.
Dadi, let's kick it off with you. A lot has happened in the semiconductor industry in the last couple of years, going from supply chain issues a couple of years ago to basically contraction in the industry for a number of reasons. But the last couple of months, sort of since late 23, we can see the industry is basically starting a new upcycle. We see DRAM prices ticking up. We see flash memory slowly sort of coming back as well. Micron overnight had good results, and they attributed it to AI. So how does this sort of improving environment in the semiconductor space affect Weebit Nano?
Well, I'll start talking about semiconductors. Not too many people understand, but semiconductors is within our life for the past 50 years, and basically everything around us was created as a result of the semiconductor technology. We're always moving around with smartphones and smartwatches, and everybody talks to the cloud and do searches and download pictures. Every 10, 15 years, there's a big event that makes the new rise in semiconductors. So in about 15 plus years ago was the internet. And everything around us was affected by internet. Data centers have been built and all of that. All of a sudden, artificial intelligence comes into our life, and there's a huge build-out that is happening to be able to process all these AI capabilities, either in the huge data centers that do all this training, learning exercise, and now is going to be upcoming soon the edge smart devices that are going to have intelligence in themselves, and they're going to do some training and learning, but mainly inference. This is a huge opportunity for many players, and for us as a memory. Memory is a big deal within AI processing, either in storing the data coming in and out the processing unit, or even storing the results of the training being put as part of the coefficient, so the edge device could easily process and understand who does he see. If it's a car, is it a cat crossing or a human being crossing the road? Should they stop? Should they turn to the right? And what is this decision? These are big decisions, have to be done instantaneously. And I think as a result, it's a huge opportunity for Weebit to be able to participate. And if there's going to be a flourish of new devices, then huge opportunity to Weebit to play in and be part of these extremely smart, intelligent devices.
All right, good stuff. So we'll come back to AI a bit later on, because I've got a specific question on that. Looking at a recent announcement you made, Coby, looking at global foundries and their 22 FDX platform, at 22 nanometers, how significant is it that you can now sort of demonstrate that? I think you're doing it at Embedded World soon, next month.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How significant is it that Weebit can now sort of demonstrate that?
So, we've talked many times about the fact that flash technology is basically stuck at 40, some people manage to push it to 28 nanometers, but the requirements and the market really wants to see a non-volatile memory that's working at smaller geometries. The fact that we now have a chip that was manufactured on one of the most popular platforms in the industry, 22 nanometer, and the chip is functioning now and we can actually demonstrate it. So that's a very important step for us, and many people are looking at that. Obviously Weebit has already been looking at even going down to smaller geometries, but the fact that we have a chip that's working, that we can demonstrate, I think that's a very important step forward.
All right. And looking back a little bit at SkyWater, so last year you were looking to sort of get a few product companies on board through SkyWater. That didn't happen, unfortunately, for a few reasons, specifically related to IP that SkyWater didn't have at the time. Can you update us on what the status is of those sort of customers that couldn't be serviced through SkyWater, if we can talk about that?
Yeah. So yes, it was disappointing for us that SkyWater didn't put an emphasis on this. SkyWater has different activities. They have a big focus on providing R&D services, which, by the way, Weebit really enjoys, and we are a big R&D customer of theirs because they actually do things faster and cheaper than Atleti. So some of the D side of R&D, we've actually moved there. They also received CHIPS Act money, and they have many projects on that side. So unfortunately, at this point at SkyWater, adding IP to their portfolio is not the highest priority. Customers that we were talking to, and we had customers that we were in very advanced stages already, bringing them on board at SkyWater. We did believe we would close with them. Some of those we actually have moved now to work with DB Hitek. So there's a focus now on getting customers ready to work with DB Hitek when the technology will actually be already working there, and we're making very good progress on that front. There are a few that actually can work, that we're identifying, new customers that are identifying, that can work with the limited IPs that exist, and we still hope to bring customers on board also at SkyWater later this year.
All right, and so you mentioned DB Hitek. Let's talk about that a little bit. In the latest presentation that was published this week, you mentioned you expect tech transfer to be completed this year, this calendar year, I'm assuming. Can you talk a little bit about that, what the time, sort of more specific about that timeline, and also in terms of, as we know by now, of course, qualification, once that's all done, how long that will take to give investors a bit of a sense of timelines really for DBH?
So we started working with DBH and making good progress there. Actually, they're very serious. It's very exciting to see just how they really put the resources and focus and making good progress there. So things are progressing on schedule there, even a little bit faster. But the technology transfer is roughly 6 to 9 month project, and we do need to do the design of the test chip and tape it out. So we're working on that very hard now. Once it's taped out, there's roughly half a year to get the technology, the silicon back, and then we need to go through the testing and eventually to the qualification, which is another almost 6 months or so. So you can understand qualification itself will already be sometime in early 2025. We'll try to do it earlier, but in the first half of 25. And we're making good progress there.
You need to understand, we are now setting up the foundations for the huge ramp in a couple of years that Coby mentioned. And so you have to go through this one, enable the foundries, enable the customers. So whenever they start the ramp, it's going to be ready to go, and the factories are going to be pumping out products with no problem, no issues, at whatever volume we can generate. So I think it's an extremely important phase for us to set up this huge ramp in a few years to come.
Right. So it's basically getting all your ducks in a row on the IP side, on the production, all that sort of stuff. So that when the time comes that you've got actual product customers coming on board, there's no hiccups at that stage. You can
Precisely.
Right.
Need to make it as easier as possible for them to put the stuff in the design and move on.
Right.
Yeah. And it is actually important to note, I was actually at DB Hitek 2 weeks ago. I came, by the way, with our new Chief Revenue Officer with Issachar. We had a discussion on, okay, how do we bring the product companies on board? So it's already, we're starting to work with them. We identified a profile of who we would prefer to have as our first customers. And now they connected us already to the sales managers in the US, in China, and Issachar now is working on that. So we're working on that, trying to, in parallel, to start bring customers on board. We have already a list of customers that are interested in this technology at DB Hitek, waiting for the progress.
Could you call that sort of the low-hanging fruit? So, and basically the question is, can you, without mentioning names, obviously, but in terms of the profile of these customers that you prefer to come on board earliest? So, what's that profile of those sort of companies like?
So, we kind of identified, it's going to be too technical to actually go into that, but these are companies that have already been using embedded non-volatile memories that understand the value and have a need for something more advanced. So we have that profile defined, and now we're going with the DB Hitek sales team to actually identify the companies and bring them on board.
Okay. And Dadi, this is probably a question for you. So the company's been talking to a lot of, most of the top 10 foundries, or all of them. Also in the presentations, it's mentioned that IDMs are in the picture, obviously. Given your background at Intel, this is probably a good question for you in terms of the conversations with IDMs, how those are sort of progressing, and especially given that, well, in this case, Intel is setting up or has set up Intel Foundry services with varying success, I think. But in terms of discussions with IDMs, how are those progressing?
We do have some. There are several interesting, in Coby's presentation, the list that are players that do their own designs. We are talking to those that their product line fits the characteristic of that will require this embedded memory. With Intel, most of the discussion have been in the foundry part of Intel, not with the necessarily with the design part of Intel, because the product that Intel develop are not necessarily fall into this domain. And it's a discussion. I'm not going to get into any details whatsoever before we have, but we talk to anyone that their business model and product line fits whatever technology that we have.
Right. And you guys mentioned it already in terms of the profile of these end customers. So the actual chip needs to sort of fit what they're working on already. But if you zoom out a bit higher level, in terms of product categories, say consumer electronics, is there a specific sort of dominance of any group in those conversations?
So if you look at what we're doing at DB Hitek, you'd notice that we're talking about 130 BCD. Mm-hmm. Okay, BCD basically identifies a subcategory, if you want to look at it that way, of product, or it's a technology which is really focused on the needs of power management and analog and sensors and those kinds of applications. Power management today is a very hot topic in the world. Basically, it's all of the different chargers. You have so many things that are mobile that you need to charge, and it's smart charging. It's not just dumb charging that you plug into the wall. You have those boxes on the cable that basically have a lot of logic and do a lot of things there. So we have a very big advantage for those guys because we are back end of line. We don't come like Flash at the front end, sitting next to the design and impacting the design. And the design actually it can't be optimal because it needs to take into account that the flash is next to it. We come on top of the design, we're back end. And so it's a much better solution for them, beyond the fact that we're faster and lower power and all of these other things. And that's really the first, you could say the lowest hanging fruit are those kinds of applications.
Okay. And you mentioned your new Chief Revenue Officer. I love that name, by the way. It's a great title. And I imagine he's come on board to tackle problems that you guys didn't get around to because there's just so much work to do, right? And you mentioned you brought him along to Korea. So talk a little bit about what this guy is doing for you. I forgot his name.
Issachar, yeah.
There you go. Well, what he's doing for Weebit, and so sort of what sort of tasks he's taking away from your desks to help speed things up.
So Issachar is a very experienced salesperson in the semiconductor IP domain. He actually, for the last many years, he was at CEVA. Actually, he was at CEVA since the day they started. And he built their whole sales organization from zero. I think last year CEVA was selling almost 140 million US dollars, and he's really done that very successfully. CEVA, by the way, is the #1 DSP IP company, so I won't go into the details, but he's very experienced in that domain, and he hit the ground running. He already has gone on several business trips, like the one with me, to different customers, and he's pushing things forward very fast now.
We talked earlier about this is the phase of putting the foundation for the ramp. So as the top chief scientist and chief engineer being critical for Weebit when we develop the technology, they're still important, but nevertheless, basically, our job is to increase the bandwidth of the company to really talk to this huge amount of IDMs, foundries, and customers, and put the foundation not one by one, but so he's increasing the bandwidth of Coby in that perspective, because Coby has some business to and a company to manage. So I think it's a very critical move in the creating the foundation for the big ramp in years to come.
All right. And so talking about the big ramp, also you're now sort of back into conversations with Chinese companies. I think you mentioned that in the presentation. Talk to us about those conversations, what sort of companies those are, and maybe, of course, it's all classified or confidential, but in terms of where the priority sits, versus, say, Korean foundries or others.
So Weebit's focus is really still on the Western world, and we haven't really changed our priorities. There are some Chinese foundries that actually have approval from the U.S. or are not on the blacklist, etc., that we can talk to, and so we're engaged. It isn't the high priority for us, but it's definitely, Chinese market is a very big one. There are foundries there, so the ones that do have these approvals, we're moving forward with those as well.
All right. And the last question, and I said earlier, AI is of course talked about, by everyone these days, and it's driving share prices. Just look at Micron popping 15% after hours. Nvidia, of course, doesn't need any introduction in that sense. But what can AI potentially mean for Weebit specifically? Because ReRAM, of course, you've mentioned this a couple of years ago actually, is pretty well suited for neuromorphic processing as well, for instance. Of course, it's not the highest priority because you're looking at embedded and discrete then neuromorphic, but maybe paint us the picture of where AI comes in for Weebit and where sort of it sits in the sort of the timelines maybe.
AI is very popular, and Dadi was mentioning the edge. So there's the big heavy computation that's done at the cloud and requires huge resources.
Which is Nvidia, Micron,
and that's Nvidia and Micron are there, but at the same time, there's a lot of activity at what's called inference at the edge devices. Yep. And you want to have all of these edge devices be able to wake up, do some computation, react to something very quickly, and then digest it and send something to the cloud and go back to sleep as fast as possible. Normally these devices are working on battery. Sometimes it's on ambient energy. It's energy harvesting, what's called. ReRAM, because it is so low power, because it is so fast, is the natural solution there. And so this is a great market for us, among many other directions, and we can talk about different applications. In so many applications, we have advantages because of the speed, because of the power. So it's a very exciting market for us.
Right. In the short term, it's the edge device, as Coby talked about. In a broader circle, AI will enable completely new devices. Most of us have not thought about that yet. That will show up. Every device is going to be extremely intelligent, and I think it's going to create huge opportunities. Even you do not necessarily process AI, that our ReRAM fits into this one. And going forward, of course, we are going to attack the larger memory size, and neuromorphic is a very interesting opportunity because ReRAM characteristics is very much similar to the way our synapses in our brain works, and it's still in research, But nevertheless, some universities are using our devices to perform research about how to use neuromorphic. If this happens, then all of a sudden the efficiency of AI computation is going to increase in orders of magnitude. But that's years out.
Right.
I think it's when it happens, the way it looks now, they're making very good progress. So
Yeah. Well, look, AI
I didn't say how many years.
well, AI is at the very early stages, really, if you look at it, right?
AI is in the
Yes.
extremely early stages.
And basically, if you look at AI right now, even what NVIDIA is doing, it's still clunky in the sense that the way data is processed, right? So it's many, many decades, I guess, to go in this space.
yes.
It's kind of, basically what the NVIDIAs are doing, they are simulating the brain in a quite non-efficient manner. Our brain is by far more efficient with respect to doing the processing, and it takes huge amount of power. This big data center is going to take much more power than the big kind of current data centers. It's going to be a big problem to the world. It has to be way more efficient going forward because the usage of computation for AI is just at the very beginning.
Yeah, and neuromorphic computing that will enable emulation and not simulation, which is orders of magnitude more efficient. And I think the world has to go in that direction.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff. A lot to look forward to, just in the very near term, but also a couple of years out.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Coby, Dadi, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.